Secrets of the Past and Future, written and read by Elton Garr. Billy leaned the bike against the guest cottage just below the window. He then climbed onto the bike seat to pull himself up far enough to look through the window. Inside was the first stranger Billy had ever seen, but what made him interesting wasn't that he was an outsider, but how much he was upsetting all the adults. They were convinced he would tell their children stories about technology and other things they had determined were too costly. "You shouldn't be spying," Billy's father said, stepping around the edge of the cottage. "I just want to know what's happening," Billy said, as he quickly climbed off his bike. "It's not that exciting. We've been discussing expanding the town for years. Dr. Bryn is the first person the council agreed to allow to move in." "What's he do?" Billy asked. Learning about technology would have been more valuable. There were always rumors and stories of people finding out about technology when they were too young. But if he was the first one to learn about the stranger, everyone at school would want to know about that too. "He's a physicist," Billy's father said. "Isn't that your job?" Billy asked. "The town can have two, perhaps even three people who do the same job. But it's not the same. He's a theoretical physicist," Billy's father said. "Can I tell people that?" Billy asked. "It's not a secret, but if you really want attention, you should avoid telling." Billy thought he understood. If he told them, it would be over, but if he didn't, they would want to know even more. He'd just have to be careful to tell them before everyone else found out. Mother wouldn't approve. She didn't seem to understand how things worked with kids, but perhaps it was just because she was a girl. "Why don't you go to the theater and watch some of the movies?" Billy's father suggested. "It's Tuesday. The girls get to decide what to watch, so there won't be anything good. They always pick talking movies." "Talking movies?" his father asked. "Yeah, there aren't even any explosions, and besides, none of my friends will be there." "Some boys might think not having any other boys there was a good thing," father said. "I'll just find Frank," Billy said. Then he thought about it and said, "Could you find out where he's at?" Billy's father chuckled and took out his tablet. He typed in something, then said, "He's at the park, by the pond." "He's working on the fort," Billy said. "Won't people see it by the pond?" father asked. "That's just where he puts his watch," Billy said. Then he realized he shouldn't have told his father that. Adults got upset when kids took off their watches. Though he didn't understand why, he was old enough to be out on his own. His father nodded thoughtfully, then glanced into the window and said, "With new people in town, you'll all need to be more careful. But I understand why you want to keep your fort location secret. Operational security is important." Billy glanced back at the window, but now that father knew he was here, he wouldn't learn much, so he rode his bike to the store. He nodded at Wendy, the teenager who watched the store. She looked up from her book and smiled. The store was a long warehouse filled with shelves. It was mostly food, but there were always a few other supplies. The building supplies were near the back. Adults used machines to build most things, but there was always stuff here for repairs or hobbies. Billy grabbed the longest board he could carry on his bike and dragged it to the front of the store. Wendy checked the small mark in her ledger so that they'd know to replace the wood. Then she grinned and added 2 more marks when Billy stuffed 2 bags of jerky into his jacket pocket and asked, "What else you need?" "Nothing," he said. Then he thought about it and asked, "Could you help me get this board on my bike?" There were 2 other people in the store, so Wendy turned the notebook so they could mark down what they took and helped him carry the long board out to his bike. People had always just written things down before Wendy had taken over the job, but they kept running out of things because people would forget to mark down what they took. After looking at the bike, Wendy went back to the store and came back out with several pieces of string and tied the board to the bike. That way he didn't have to hold the board while riding the bike. "Thanks, Wendy," he said cheerfully, jumping onto his bike and starting towards the park. He couldn't turn the wheel all the way, but so long as he didn't go too fast, it wouldn't matter. He forgot about that as he turned down the steep hill into the park. His bike gained speed quickly, like it had hundreds of other times. Only when he tried to turn and the wheel hit the board that he realized his mistake. As he hit the edge of the muddy road, he lost control and was thrown over his handlebars and into a tree. He rolled over onto his back, holding onto his arm for a few seconds. It throbbed, and it hurt even more when he let go long enough to grab his watch and twist the top, signaling to everyone in town that he needed help. Miss Kingston, who lived near the top of the hill, reached Billy first. The short, round woman didn't know what to do, so she lowered herself onto the ground next to him and told him help was on the way. He lost track of time in the pain, but soon he was given 2 pills by Doc Hanson. That helped enough that he was more aware of what was happening. Then he was helped onto the back of the van and told he'd be leaving the town for the first time in his life. He tried to tell his mother he'd be fine. He was just sleepy. She assured him that it was just the pills and he could sleep in the van if he wanted. He woke up in a white room full of lights and loud machines. A nurse was standing over him and smiled as he opened his eyes. "You had a long night." Billy was about to call for his mom when she took his hand. But there was something odd. He could only feel her touching his fingers, and then he glanced over and saw his arm was in a cast. "Am I going to be okay?" he asked. "Nothing time won't heal," the nurse said, and as he glanced at her, he saw a computer screen across the room with a video playing. "What's that?" Billy asked, most of the pain disappearing at the excitement. "It's a television. It's like a movie theater, but in your house. But you have your books," his mother said. "A couple of days of TV won't hurt, and holding the tablet with one hand isn't easy," his dad said. He was holding a small box covered with buttons, and he handed it to Billy. "It's a remote control. You can push those buttons to change the channel, and those change the volume. The big red one turns it off. That's the most important one," his mother said. She had never really liked him going to the theater either, but this upset her more. "You're from one of the secluded communities," the nurse asked. "We're from Valley Park," his dad said. "I've heard about Valley Park. Thank you. And I'll remove anything you want except for the medical equipment, of course," the nurse said. "We're not against technology like some others," Dad said, then added, "We just think some aren't worth the cost." "Like the TV," the nurse said. "We have a theater where people can watch things without sitting home alone all day," his mother said. "I suppose that's some people," the nurse said. "We all have to vote on what to watch," Billy said, trying to keep the annoyance out of his voice. "We also don't have any restrictions on medical technology. It's just a small town," Father said. "She doesn't care, Hank," Billy's mother said. "It sounds like a delightful town," the nurse said. "Can I look around?" Billy asked, looking at his father, who was far more likely to let him explore than his mother. "You've already seen plenty," his mother said, and she took the remote control from his hand and turned off the TV. "You don't want to get used to things you can't have." That was the excuse they always used for not telling kids things they wanted to know. But Billy had always thought it was unfair. The adults got to decide where they lived, but Billy and all the kids had been born there. What if they wanted to have televisions? "He'll be 13 in 3 months anyway," Father said. "At 13, they let you in on part of the secret. If you want to show him how money works, you go right ahead. But I don't think Billy should be in virtual reality or playing violent video games yet," she said. "I doubt either will trigger any nightmares for him or me," his father said. Billy had heard his father screaming at night, but all they had told him was that his father was okay. Billy wasn't sure he wanted to know about something that scared his father. "This whole place is enough to cause nightmares," Mother said, and Billy squeezed her hand. "So let's find out how he reacts. We've given him the pills, so he won't remember this. It might make the process easier later," Billy's father said. "Why won't I remember?" Billy asked. "We have pills that stop you from accessing long-term memory. There's an antidote, but you don't want to remember the pain," Billy's father said. "Fine, tell him, but you deal with the consequences of a scared, hurt child," Billy's mother said. "He's tougher than you think. We'll start with the part he'll learn in a few months," Billy's father said, and he turned to Billy and said, "We're not on Earth, and it's not 2103. That's why the moon looks different in the old movies," Billy said. "And that's why we can't visit other cities. The biggest city on the planet only has about 200,000 people," Billy's mother said. "That's awesome. Why is that a secret?" Billy asked. "Mostly because it's not all that important for you to know, and it makes all the other secrets easier to keep," Dad said. Billy thought about it for a few seconds, then said, "If it's not 2103, and we're on another planet, that means we're probably a lot more advanced than you've told us." "Those are the questions we don't want you asking," Dad said, then added, "Once you've had a couple of years to get used to living on an alien world, we explain more. Earlier, if you ask the right question. You'll also be given more access to the historical records. Most kids just don't take advantage of that." Just tell him, Hank, his mother said. Fine, it's the year 3204. About 1100 years have passed since the times you know. You've been alive for just over 800 of those, Dad said. But I'm only 12 and a half, Billy said. That is true, in one sense, Mother said. We're friends. We met in the war. We saw a lot of bad things neither one of us wants to remember. But it's hard to remove memories that way, so some smart people came up with a solution, Billy's father said. You removed all my memories and let me have a second childhood, Billy said. And by the time you're old enough to decide what you want to remember, the computer has 16 years or more to organize the memories so you can pick what you want to remember. But if I want to remember it all, Billy said. You don't. I still have nightmares and I've had specific memories removed, so all that is left are the memories. It's best to just forget everything after you join the military. Billy had a lot of questions. He wanted to know about the war, about everyone in his town, about the stars and other worlds. But there was only one question that really mattered. So he said, If you're not really my parents, does that mean you don't love me? Don't be silly. We are your parents, in every way that matters. Though it is odd raising someone who looks like the man I used to go out and party with and do other things with, Billy's father said, cutting off after his mother gave him a warning look. What if I still want all the memories back? Billy asked. Then at least you'll have a second childhood and a second set of parents to help you through the pain, Billy's mother said. What if I decide I don't want to remember any of it, including this? Billy asked. You told your name, about your history and your family, and a few friends you wanted to be reminded of. But I think you'll want more. You're taking all of this far better than I expected. I hope I do as well, Father said. You're going to do the same thing? Billy asked. I didn't see as much as you in the war, and removing the direct memories helped. But I'm still considering it. You did promise to raise me if I decided I needed to. That seemed strange to Billy, but also fair. But it led to another question. And would Mother help me raise you? No, I'm your mother, not your wife. I'll live nearby and help with the babysitting. You'll probably want to live with your own wife. Or perhaps you'll meet someone you want to raise a child with. And there are people who just pick someone who they can live with for a couple of decades and pretend to be married. There are a few of those in Valley Park, Billy's mother said. And I won't remember this? Billy asked. We won't tell you most of this until you turn 16, Billy's father said. Then can you tell me what a smartphone is? Billy asked. Kids have been discussing it for years, but none of them understood how a phone could be smart. Sure, then we can play video games, Billy's dad said, then added, and since you have a broken arm, I might even win. Author's note. Many Americans, including me from time to time, are nostalgic for a place that never existed. A mythical time in our country's history when everyone was happy, children were well behaved, there was a chicken in every pot, and the world was at peace. One thing you can be fairly certain of when people talk about that nostalgic time is that they probably have the same gender and roughly the same skin tone as me. But part of what makes science fiction so much fun is you can go to places that don't exist. And so I imagined a future where that image of the past could exist, where people have a balanced community and technology creating the types of place that we wish once existed in America. Of course, there is more to it than that, partially because this is a story, and partially because it's about people. Though in this case, I allowed the town to remain a place of safety, because while mythologizing the past and trying to get it back, again, is a bad thing, believing that we can create a future that is better has value, as does trying to imagine ways it might work. If you enjoyed this story, visit www.anscifi.com to sign up for my weekly newsletter and get a free short story every week. Or you can get over 40 patron-exclusive stories by signing up for my Patreon at patreon.com/Elton. Thank you, Elton.